and give us a countdown.
Yep, I'll bring it in. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Tortured Man Podcast. This is February the 19th, a week after the Super Bowl, and our prognostications, if I said that word right, about the Super Bowl, and we were both correct, as I expected us to be. And so today, we are going to take up some of the things that happened in the Super Bowl, why certain things mattered, why the one you think mattered the most actually did matter at all, and why the Chiefs actually were the team that should have won that game. And we will start off by going to my brother Chad and let him have first say.
Oh man, there's just so much to talk about with this thing. I don't want to be petty, man. I'm sorry. I hate to be this guy, but the so much of the storyline has been tainted. I hate to start here, but so much has been tainted by the hold on Juju. All the Eagles fans think it's complete and total BS. I mean, I understand that it's late in the game. I understand that it's frustrating. I know if I was a Chiefs fan, if I were or not a
That
Chiefs
is
fan,
clearly a hold, however. That picture that we have posted right now, that is clearly a hold.
I mean, come on. I know, like, it's frustrating. I know that they did that to Juju a couple other times in the game and they didn't call for it. And so you're like, well, they weren't getting called for it before. Well, guess what? They got called for it then.
Do you know how we know that it's absolutely holding even without the visual? One very simple reason why we know that it was holding is that the Eagles defender Bradbury, after the game, said that it was holding. So, and he said, and I quote, "I was just hoping they'd let me get away with it." They didn't.
No.
He got caught, and that's what happens. The idea that this game that played out for 58 minutes before this, somehow that 58 minutes of this game didn't count at all, and it was garbage, and the whole thing should be flushed down the toilet. Nobody gets to win, and it's a tie now, all because of one call, by the way, that was the correct call. Now, you may not like the call. You can say it's chippy that they were doing this all game, yada, yada, yada. Doesn't matter. At the end of the day, he was holding. He admitted he was holding. So that did not change the outcome of the game. And you can make the argument that the two other plays during that game, the Dallas Goedert catch on 3rd and 14, which absolutely spectacularly was not a catch, and the Eagles running back, name escapes me off the top of my head, who caught the ball. They said it was not a catch. When it was a catch, a fumble, and 7 points for the Chiefs. And if you take that 7 points that never should have been taken off the board, and the missed field goal that he should have easily made because it wasn't from that far, it's a 48-35 game, not a 38-35 game. So the fact that the Chiefs were even struggling at the end of this game to score a touchdown to make sure that they would win, to me, that probably shouldn't have happened because they should have already had a pretty sizable lead at that point. And they didn't have that sizable lead at that point because of other calls that were made. And I have not heard any Kansas City fans screaming and crying about that. Now, however, if they would have lost, we might have heard that. But no, I haven't heard anybody making this. Like if you go on any of the Alphabet Soup sports shows, I haven't heard anybody really making the observation that those two calls were wrong. Now they're wrong from my estimation. Maybe one of them was right and one of them was wrong, but considering the way that both of those played out, they can't both be right or both be wrong. That's an impossibility. And this is my reasoning for it. Had the Eagles running back caught that ball, got lit up by the corner exactly the way he did, and hung onto the ball, that would have been a catch. The fact that he got lit up and dropped the ball makes it not a catch, then that makes half the catches in the NFL not catches simply because they dropped the ball after they got blown up by a defender. He had the ball with both hands, turned, had total control. Dallas Goedert on the 3rd and 14, he didn't have control of that ball at all. He bobbled it. He pinned it against his head. He only had 1 foot in bounds. So either they're both not a catch or they're both a catch. They can't be one of each. So which one is it? And either way, the Eagles aren't in that game in the time frame for the Bradbury hold call. If Gobbert doesn't get that 3rd and 14, the Eagles don't score a touchdown. If we give that away, then the hit scoop up for a touchdown on the non-catch call, that would have stood, and then you're still up by 7 points either way. So the Eagles were already on borrowed time. Not only that, a lot of what the Eagles fans aren't talking about in the second half of that game is how badly the Eagles were literally getting their asses kicked. They had a big lead into the halftime. They kept the ball out of Pat Mahomes' hands. And in the second half, Pat Mahomes just simply outscored them by double digits. That's what happened. And they lost the game because of that. Pat Mahomes only had one incompletion in the entire second half. He was banked. They were genius. Both touchdowns that he threw in the second half had one commonality, two commonalities. They were the exact same play, just one to the right and to the left. And the reason that those guys were wide open is because they were double and triple and cover. And the only guy that they thought was going to get the ball, which was Kelsey. And Andy Reid's use of Kelsey as a decoy in the second half is nothing short of genius, because he was constantly double covered and somebody was always open. And that, the fact that the defensive coordinator for the Eagles couldn't adjust to what they were doing during that second half, that's entirely on him. It's not on the referees or anybody else. The Eagles had the game. They gave it up because he hit a superior force, not overall, but in one person. And that superior force was Pat Mahomes.
Well, one of your big predictions was that Andy Reid's genius would play a massive part in this game, and it clearly did. Those two wide open touchdowns,
they weren't even close. That looked like college football kind of wide open, not NFL wide open.
It was beautiful.
So we had talked the day of the game, and I said that if my grandmother was still alive, God rest her soul, she could have caught the ball and walked into the end zone. That's how wide open they were. It wasn't even a close call. Nobody was within 10 yards of either one of those guys. And it was the exact same play. First ran to their right side and then to their left side. And it was the exact same outcome. And if you pan back and you look at what they're doing with Kelsey, they're jamming him up with 2 and 3 guys, because everybody thought the ball would go, because in the first half, that's exactly what happened. In the second half, hey, look, if you got a guy that you know that they can't stop, the defense is concerned about him. In the first half, he blew you up for 5 catches for like 75 yards and a touchdown and a deep ball, then you have to adjust to him. Well, they made that adjustment. The problem was Andy Reid outsmarted him and knew you were going to make that adjustment, and then didn't really go to him in the second half. And Juju did a great job picking up the slack. He stepped up his game in the second half too, and not enough people are talking about how great Juju played in the second half.
Yeah, he had a monster game. But back to Big Red, leave it to him to do 2 things. Name a play after a food. That play is called corn dog. And also to scheme up a play that brings your wide receiver 13 yards away from the nearest defender, one of them, and the other one was like 10 or 12. And those 2 touchdowns, I think they were in the top 2 percentile for most wide open touchdowns all season. And they happened in the Super Bowl on the same play, just on 2 different sides. And interestingly enough, Sky Moore, who got the other one, Kadarius Toney the one, and then Sky Moore the other. Sky Moore was on the wrong side and just happened to run the play, and Mahomes is like, F it. I mean, why not? So I thought that was pretty cool too. But you were absolutely correct in the prediction that Andy Reid's genius would play a heavy role. It absolutely. And another prediction you said was that Jalen Hurts would play out of his mind, and you were kind of worried that shoulder might play a role, but boy, did it not, and boy, was he just absolutely just dynamic. If the Chiefs didn't win the Super Bowl, Hurts was going to be the MVP of the Super Bowl,
it was,
above and beyond.
Yeah. What I said about Hurts, I said, if Hurts plays as well as he can, then all bets were off in terms of how the game would play out. And that's kind of what occurred. Nobody, well, at least I'm sure there were people, but I wasn't one. I was pretty convinced at that point that he wasn't doing real well in the games preceding and that he was having some trouble and that the shoulder was probably giving him more trouble than anybody wanted to lead on to. But as it turns out, he was ready to go. He played crazy football, and nowhere in the world would you not be MVP and other than that. And if it wasn't for what Pat Mahomes did in the second half, even if Kansas City would have won that game, he probably would have deserved the MVP in a loss because what he did was ridiculous. Over 300 yards passing, completing well over 70% of his passes, and rushing for 80 some more yards, scoring 2 touchdowns with his feet. He was remarkable. And that should, if you're a Philadelphia fan, man, you got to be happy about the future. This team is loaded. They have young talent. These guys aren't on big contracts yet, and they have a boatload of draft picks coming to them again this year. This team, look, the NFC right now isn't in nearly as good a shape as the AFC is. So you make the argument that San Francisco, if they can keep a quarterback healthy, is in Philadelphia's league. But outside of that, who actually is? Right now, Philadelphia is like, who's challenging them next year other than the San Francisco 49ers? Who? I just don't see anybody else. The NFC, you got 5 teams straight off the top that you can name very quickly that everybody can, so I won't bore you with it, that have a legitimate shot if somebody can get lucky enough to knock Kansas City off. Philadelphia doesn't have any formidable opponents other than the San Francisco 49ers after we just watched everything play out this year. Now, if Brody or if Lance and San Francisco both end up being even half the players that they're hoping that they can be, San Francisco's no joke either. They're kind of a scary football team. But Minnesota, Dallas, they're pretenders. Green Bay's aging and Aaron has no help. I mean, you can always count on the Washington football team to just fall apart when it matters the most. I don't think the Giants are quite there yet, although they're getting there. And we see what happens to a Super Bowl champion like the Rams if you take away their quarterback. I mean, they were horrible this year. And it was all because they just didn't have their quarterback playing all year long, pretty much. So Philadelphia is in really, really good shape to make run after run after run to the Super Bowl year in and year out. And it's going to be them in San Francisco duking it out every year for at least the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Rams are going to be doomed for a while because they're in cap hell. Their chickens have come home to roost. They sold. That's it.
I disagree. I disagree.
They got them a ring, but
there are teams in cap hell that look at them and go, "Wow, those guys are really in cap hell." They sold everything out for a Super Bowl win, and it worked. Tampa Bay is now facing the same thing because of selling out for Tom Brady. Yeah. Tampa Bay has to completely rebuild, and they're in cap hell too. They can hold hands with the Rams in cap hell because neither one are coming out of it. But I'm glad that Stafford got his title because he deserved it.
Absolutely. That worked out cool for him.
Yeah, it really did.
Pretty sweet. Back to the predictions. I predicted that the defense of the Chiefs would play a fundamental role in the win in one major way. But the way I predict, yeah, they for sure did. But the way I predicted it wasn't really the way. So I kind of thought Frank Clark would have a big show up day where he'd keep Hurts contained. Hurts was having a day, man. He was not to be denied. And if it wasn't for that fumble with Nick Bolton being right there and scooping that bad boy up, making a heads-up play, man. You know, it was Bolton that was on that other play that should have been another 6 points, but whatever.
Right.
But I did predict, so I was 50-50 on that. The two names I was really leaning on, Clark and Bolton. Clark not so much, but whatever. He did some things in the playoffs I'm certainly thankful for, but he also has a monster contract that's coming to an end. And Clark, thank you so much for everything you've done. Clark Sharp, but
and by the way, Clark occupied. Oftentimes he was double teamed, and oftentimes they kept Sanders in the backfield and not using him for screens or flares because they were putting him to help with Clark. So while he did not go in there and sack the quarterback over and over again, or it didn't have the statistics in the game, He took a lot of pressure off his defense.
We have to talk about that because that's something that even like Jason Kelsey said is that the offensive lines had a massive advantage with the slippery ass field that the D couldn't dig in, they couldn't get off the line, and that they weren't having that penetration that they normally could get because they were just slipping and sliding. And so
Shame on
I
the
think that
NFL,
had a
by the
big
way.
problem too. That was terrible,
Shame on the
terrible.
NFL for trying a new kind of turf on the premier game of any sport in the world, the Super Bowl of all places, and you're going to try a new turf and you have no idea how it's effectively going to work out. They should be ashamed of themselves.
Yeah, that's a really bad look, man. I don't I don't even understand it how that happens.
That's something that I'm not hearing a lot of the other talk shows that are in our league in that 10, 15 million people audience, except for,
I mean,
we're
it's
10 or 15 million people short of it.
little handful.
But, but in all seriousness, how do you, well, we're going to try a new hybrid turf and we're going to try it at the Super Bowl. What? Like, if you're going to try it, shouldn't you maybe have tried it in the regular season? No, you know what? That's even stupid. How about preseason? How about you try this in preseason? Because I'll tell you what, they would have put that in any field in the NFL during the preseason, and that's the result they got. They would have scrapped that plan. And we got stuck with it in the Super Bowl. Watching those guys skate around like they were hockey players took something away from the game that shouldn't have been taken. Now, I will always be the guy that will make the argument that they both had to play on the same field. So they both have the same disadvantage when that's going on. So that did not change the outcome of the game necessarily. But we could have had bigger plays, crazier stuff going on. It would have been easier to get a hold of Jalen Hurts or Pat Mahomes on both defensive sides if their guys didn't have to change direction so hard and then just have their feet come right out from underneath them and face planted into the turf trying to keep up with some of these guys. That turf, I'll say it again, they should be ashamed of what they did on that field. And the fact that the commissioner's office hasn't even come out and said, yeah, we kind of really screwed the pooch on that one, really just talks about the arrogance to Goodell and his jackbooted douchebags in the NFL office.
Well, the Chiefs started their season in Arizona, and that field was trash. First game of the season, and we lost Butker, our kicker, for several weeks because he rolled an ankle on a kick because it was just slipping and sliding in.
And it
And so
wasn't
if you
this
would have told
turf.
me, no, it was grass. If you would have told me or whatever it was really bad. If you would have told me that they're gonna fix the field for the Super Bowl, but it's gonna be worse, I would have been like,
You wouldn't have believed it.
You're crazy.
You'd be like, no way. That's not even possible to be worse than that field. I get it if you're playing in Buffalo in December and you're skating around on the field, right? You're in Arizona. It was 70 some degrees. There was no rain. What is going on? How is this even happening? And it just detracted from some things, but both teams had to deal with it. I thought from the equipment manager side of things, they both adapted as well as they possibly could have. They were changing out cleats. They were trying to minimize it as best they could. I thought Philadelphia did a much better job in the first half of making sure that their skilled players went from a half-inch cleat to a three-quarter-inch cleat, and it worked. They went into halftime with a pretty sizable lead. And they were not slipping around and falling down as much as the Chiefs were. To be fair, I think the Chiefs had the ball for 16 seconds in the first half or something like that. So they really didn't have a whole lot of opportunities to be on the field on the offensive side, which we'll talk about later. It's remarkable what the Chiefs did with the time that they actually had.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a Chiefs fan for a long time since I've been a little kid, and ever since the Pat Mahomes era, I have learned to not sweat it. You saw me in the first Super Bowl appearance for Patty a few years back and before, and I mean, they were down, and I'm just like, yeah, it's nerve wracking, but it's all right. I know what's about to happen, and so there was no point where I thought, oh crap, the Eagles are getting ahead and they're going to get out of hand. That doesn't happen with Patrick Mahomes. It seems like the more he gets behind, the more he gets in his zone, and the more he gets locked in, and the crazier he gets. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because I said if we win this, if the Chiefs win this game, it'll be because Mahomes, an MVP, Super Bowl MVP performance, and obviously he did because he won the prize. But if you look at the stat line, it'll lie to you. You know what I mean? The stats don't say MVP, and in fact, if
Well,
if
the stats
Kadarius Tony,
do.
if Kadarius Tony takes that punt to the house, he's got a strong argument for MVP as well, right?
Well,
That
I think
punt that already broke the record.
but with Pat, his stats, which seemed pedestrian for him, were almost entirely in the second half. I mean, it's almost like that he threw for 200 plus yards or just over. 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns, but he did 85% of that in the second half, and he threw 1 incompletion. 1.
Yeah.
That's remarkable. In the first half, the Eagles, for the entire game, the Eagles only had the ball for 24 minutes. But in the second half of that game, they had the ball for 18 minutes. They had the ball for 6 minutes in the first half of football. So they scored offensively. They scored 31 points because defense scored a touchdown. They scored 31 points in 24 minutes. That's more than a point a minute. The only other team that ever did that in Super Bowl history is the Giants, who scored 21 points in 19 minutes and managed to lose the game.
Right.
No, they won the game. They beat the Bills 21-19 on a field goal with seconds left in the game. So did you put up 31 points in 24 minutes? That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, he was, clearly injured, clearly gutting it out, and then had some big runs,
The 26-yard run in
in
the fourth quarter, it's crazy that any human could even do a thing like that. You could see the pain. And let's not forget that he was hurt in the second quarter. Like, they had to help him off the field. He was on the sideline withering in pain. And everyone, particularly super fans like yourself, you texted me immediately, "Oh my God, this could be the end." Right? It did not. And my thought was immediately, this guy gutted it out a couple of weeks ago, a few weeks back with the fresh injury, and only missed a series that he's going to miss any time in this game. No, I knew immediately he was going to come back in the game. The only question was whether or not he could actually do anything but stay in the pocket. And I don't know how he forced himself through that. It was pretty remarkable watching him do what he did, when most players would never be able to do it. And even if you were the player that 3 weeks after an injury that bad, third-degree high ankle sprain, and you could come back in 3 weeks, which is unusual to begin with, but you re-injured that same injury 20 minutes or 22 minutes into the game, and then you finished the game anyhow. I don't think I've ever seen that. I don't think I've ever seen anybody do that before.
Yeah, man. It's just so fun to be a Chiefs fan right now. I can't lie. Feel a little bit like greedy almost, but
Yeah, with the Patriots, you know what the Patriots fans feel like.
Starting to feel like what those folks went through, where it's like, everybody hates us, but I don't care. Keep them coming.
Well, here's the thing. Everybody can like you at the front end of things. It's hard. To me, the difference, just from an outside perspective, because I'm not I don't like the Patriots, but I'm not a fan of either team the way that real fans are. I'm just a fan of football. And then I have my own teams, which aren't currently in the playoffs or the Super Bowl. So the difference between Tom Brady to me and Patrick Mahomes, and I'm not going to get into the semantics about whose talent is more, Pat Mahomes. I'm not going to say that Tom Brady had anything special or that Mahomes has to work in a different way. They're talented, incredibly talented Hall of Fame players either way. The big difference to me is Tom Brady is not likable. He's an asshole, and he's an arrogant asshole, and that's what I don't like about him. I love Pat Mahomes because he's affable and he never takes credit for anything that goes on during the game. And he never acts like a baby during the game, and he never throws fits, and he never throws hats or clipboards or doesn't scream at people. He's a consummate pro, and I just think he's a nicer, more likable character than Tom Brady. But they're both great. I just think that Mahomes at the end of the day will, if he stays healthy, will probably go down as one of the greatest talents the NFL has ever seen, period.
It's just funny because Giselle was the nice one out of the two, but with Pat, his old lady's the insufferable one.
Right. And his stupid brother.
Oh, God.
His stupid brother. Here's the thing. Pat's the guy who's earning the money, winning the championships, and is solidifying everything for his family. And his brother and his wife are the ones that are out there acting like the asshats. You know, you guys haven't accomplished anything. You haven't done anything. You're riding on his coattails and you're acting like elitist. It's matter of fact, they're acting like Tom Brady's. That's what they're doing, except for they're not Tom Brady. So it's even a worse look for them than it is for Brady himself.
Right.
But Brady's gone now, so we don't have to worry about him.
Exactly.
And even if he does come back, we still don't have to worry about him because it's finally over. His remarkable career, remarkable. Because I know people are going to piss on me about this, but Tom Brady is a first ballot, unanimous Hall of Famer, end of sentence. I just don't like him. And you're not going to make me like him either. All right, so there's some other things.
Real quick, before we move on, did you happen to see any of the Chiefs parade?
I have not.
Well, there's one spot where Brett Veach holds up he's standing with the Lombardis behind him, and he said, this was supposed to be a rebuilding year in Kansas City, and he picks up the Lombardi and he goes, this is what it looks like to have a rebuilding year in Kansas City.
Oh, no, you said that to me. That was fun.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of that has to do with Tyreek Hill, and I opened up our preview cast last time with my condolences to Tyreek Hill, and I just watched this morning this whole 5-minute montage of all of the naysayers early in the beginning of the season, saying the Raiders and the Chargers and the Broncos were all going to be, the Chiefs are going to be the last in the AFC West, and of course I knew it was BS all along. I'm like, you're crazy, but so many people made this bold prediction, and where are we at anyway? I just had to rub that in their face a little bit because losing Tyreek Hill, everybody had us left for dead without the cheetah, and look at where we are.
Right. You're a lifelong dyed-in-the-wool Chiefs fan, stuck with them long before Pat Mahomes showed up and they got good. So you get to crow a little bit. That's just the way that works. So there was some other things that I wanted to bring up. One of the things on the negative on the Chiefs side that I wanted to bring up was, and I see it all year long, and I certainly hope Spagnuolo is going to address it and bring in players and maybe able to help with it. But it is so frustrating to watch the Chiefs defense for 2 consecutive plays put a team in 3rd and 14, 3rd and 12, 3rd and 18, and then they get a first down like it was easy. That was driving me insane during that game. And they had 3rd and long. When they showed that stat in the first half that the Eagles at that point were like 4 of 6 on 3rd and long, it's like in the Super Bowl of all places that you guys are this successful on 3rd and long. Oh, that's so frustrating. As a Chiefs fan, you had to be ready to just tear your hair out of your head.
Yeah, they kept killing McDuffie, our rookie, and it was tough to watch. Yeah, he just kept getting nailed, and he's a rookie. It's a huge game. He's got to do better than that. Hopefully, his second year, hopefully he's got some experience under his belt and he can show out better than that, because you're right, that was happening all season, and it's frustrating to watch. And when you have 3rd and long, you got to get a stop there, and when it's a team like the Eagles, especially, who put up a lot of points, you got to use those third and longs to your advantage, because if you get them in short yardage, they're just going to do what they always do with Hurts. If it's 3 yards or less, they're punching it through.
Their short yardage offense is unstoppable. I mean, the Chiefs tried everything they could on those 3rd and 1s, 4th and 1, goal line, goal to go right at the 1. They tried everything. They had guys diving over top and making first contact. Problem is, if you're floating on the top of a bunch of other guys, you don't have a whole lot of leverage. But but the way the Eagles just shoved them back 3-4 yards with ease, and nothing against Kansas City here. I watch Eagles all year long. They did that to everybody. Their offensive line, and that's one of the points that I brought up in our before the game last week, was that their offensive line is world class. They have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, period. And they proved that in that game, especially their short yardage, their big player offensive line. When you go to your biggest formations, man, they're just almost unstoppable. Eagles are going to be good for a long time. Eagle fans should be happy. If I would have lost that game, but I was an Eagles fan, just like last year, Cincinnati lost, but you could have came away from that game going, we blew our only chance. Cincinnati's going to be good for a long time. And so are the Eagles. I still can't believe that the Eagles have already built this team where they're at, and they got all the draft picks they have this year. It's stupid.
Dude, I wouldn't be surprised, the least bit surprised to see a rematch next year in the Super Bowl.
Oh, no, not at all. Well, first
these teams aren't going anywhere.
Kansas City's the odds-on favorite for going back to the Super Bowl. It's just one of those things where I think Cincinnati is up to the task, obviously, because they've beaten them a couple of times. I think Buffalo is, if they can stay healthy. Buffalo just all the injuries they had, and they need more than Stephon Diggs for Josh Allen to go to. They need something else going on. Knox is an okay tight end, but he's marginal. He's in the middle of the road, if that. So Stephon Diggs is all you have. And if you can shut Stephon down, or at least keep him to under 100 yards, you got a good shot at beating them, because they don't have anywhere else to go with the ball. So,
right.
But there's so many good teams. If I was Kansas City, the team that I would be maybe a little more concerned about in my own division would be the Chargers, because Herbert is a really good quarterback. That team is not in cap hell. They have a lot of young players too. They have a good they have a full cast of draft picks this year. They trade stuff away. If they can keep their players healthy. I mean, they had, like, Allen last year was hurt again. And they have great young running back. I mean, that guy's amazing. God, he carried that team a lot this year. They get some defensive help. I thought they were going to be better than they were this year. But you can't, it's impossible, no matter how good a team is. We saw it with the Rams. When your best wide receivers go down, half your offensive line goes down, and they miss half the games, or if not more than half of the games during the year, you're not going to be what you once were. Kansas City is one of those teams where it's not just that you have to deal with the guys who are on the field playing in regular rotation. It's Kansas City, Andy Reid, and he did this in Philadelphia as well. He's very, very good at keeping, and this is what Belichick is particularly great at, is when guys go out, because it will happen. It's impossible that it won't. It's the NFL. But the guys, when they go out, that the guys that are coming in behind them aren't a real drop down very far. You're not going from grade A to grade C. You're going from grade A to B plus. And those guys can help hold things together. And of course, Pat Mahomes, the way that offensively, whether it's Eric Bieniemy's idea or whether it's Reid or a combination of both, the way that they're constantly shuffling different receivers in. Even in the fourth quarter, one of the long on third and long gains that Pat Mahomes had, he went to the second string tight end. The only catch he had in like 2 months, right? But that's what they do. They have so many guys that they can bring in that can hurt you. And those guys can be starting on other teams, but they want to be on a championship team. Now, some of those guys they leave after they get their Super Bowl ring because they want to start somewhere. They might not be able to do it in Kansas City. But Andy Reid, like always, will plug somebody in who can take up the slack anyway. And so for teams that aren't in that position, and that's where drafting, in Kansas City's draft has been very good for years. They have a lot of talent that they brought in themselves that are continuing to, even though they're not all the time starters, are constantly giving you bang for the buck. When they have to get into the game, they play well and they come up big for the team. So if you can do that, New England did that effectively for damn near 20 years. And Andy Reid's got that going on in Kansas City right now. It's why even when good guys go out of games, Chiefs fans know they don't have to panic because the next guy coming in is going to burn your ass too.
Yeah, those young tight ends are guys we've drafted over the past few years, and Noah Gray and Blake Bell, who's a hometown guy from the Kansas City area, metropolitan area, and they're guys.
Where did he come from?
He went to high school in Kansas City. Who did Blake
he didn't
Bell,
do much until the last part of the season, and they came up huge in the playoffs.
Well, and Bell was hurt last year. He's just a young, really good tight end. They call him the Belldozer. He's kind of a road grader kid. He's 31 now, but
it's a kid to me.
Oklahoma. He was Sooner.
It literally is a kid to me. He'd be younger than my kids, except for one of them.
Yeah, he played down in Oklahoma. He's 6'6", 251, big boy. But anyway, nonetheless, what do you think about the Commanders' new offensive coordinator, assistant head coach?
Did they hire Bieniemy?
Eric Bieniemy, yeah.
Did they hire him?
They did.
Good, because they need an offensive coordinator. They left points on the field last year. The Commanders could have been a playoff team, even though they're quarterback poor. They are not hurting. They have stud players at wide receiver and at tight end and at running back, particularly at running back. They have 2 or 3 guys that can rush for 1,000 yards in a year. Their defense is solid, but their offense couldn't put points on the board last year. And this is what happens when your head coach is a defense coordinator and doesn't have a real offensive-minded person run the show. Question is Eric Bieniemy any good? We're going to find out. I think that he needed to get away from Andy Reid to prove to the NFL brass, the guys, the owners, that Andy Reid's not the one. It's me. And if he goes to Washington and they make the playoffs and they do well and his offensive schemes work, he'll be a head coach fast. If he goes to Washington and he shits the bed, which I actually expect him to do, then he'll never get a head coaching job. Because if you're asking me, do I think Andy Reid is the genius behind everything? If I thought it was Eric Bieniemy, I would have brought it up when we were talking about, and it wasn't Andy Reid's the one who made the adjustments at halftime. I'm not giving that credit to Bieniemy. I could be wrong, but it always looked like Andy Reid was running that offense. He's always been an offensive guy. He was an offensive coordinator, an offensive line coach, played the offensive line in the NFL. He's an offense guy. It's always been Andy Reid. So we could be wrong.
Everybody knows it.
Look,
everybody knows it's Andy Reid who runs the show. He's the big offensive guru. He lets Spags take care of the defense.
Yep.
And Bieniemy, I'm sorry, I've listened to a lot of interviews or mostly like press conferences, and I get it that stupid media asks all these ignorant questions, and like in classic Belichick fashion, you give them a lot of just BS answers and canned answers and stuff like that. But even like more like off the cuff interviews, you always get like you feel like he's just following a script. It just always feels very superficial. Like he's not, like he's just he knows what he's supposed to say and he's just saying it. And I don't know if that means anything bad about the guy or not. But I think that if you're a billionaire and you're trying to hire this guy to run your organization, you probably say some off the wall stuff to see how he responds, and I bet he's not able to. if it's not just this very simple world that he's in. And again, nothing against the guy. I just think that he's made for what he's doing. I don't know that he's ready for that other step. A lot of guys fall on their face,
That's right.
and now
And I
they're
think
giving
that's
him
going to be
an
interesting.
excellent chance here because they're making him an assistant head coach. He is complete carte blanche over the offense. All him. Rivera's like,
Yep.
it's all you, dude.
And
So this is his shot. And you know what? I'm pulling for him. I hope he proves me wrong.
oh
I hope
yeah,
he's badass. I hope he turns that
look,
place
I
around.
I'm always for
I just
these
feel like
guys
the
coming
reason why he
across
hasn't
well.
gotten a shot so far is because he's just a good interview. That's all I think.
The interesting thing here for me, and obviously Eric knows it. He has to. Redskins are for sale, right? And they're going to be sold. So whomever is there, unless they go deep into the playoffs next year, because I don't figure that sale is going to be done. Even if the team was sold now, it's too late to get a coaching staff and change everything over. So these guys are going to be there for one more year. So unless they go deep into the playoffs, whoever the new owner is going to bring in his own people, and they're all going to be gone either way. So Bieniemy has this year to prove that it was as much him as it was Andy Reid, and that's it. And
He has two. He has two because you don't want to be the guy who gave him his first chance and then you fired him like right away.
yeah, but you didn't hire him as head coach, though. He's not the head coach. So when they
Well,
just
that's a
get
good
rid,
point. If
they're going to
Rivera's
get
gone,
rid
then
of
he'll be gone.
right. They're going to get rid of
Okay.
everybody. Now, if the Redskins offense turns into not a juggernaut, but a team that you can consistently count on to put 28 to 31 points on the board, their defense plays as it should, they win 12 or 13 games, their division or close to it, and go deep in the playoffs, then maybe you keep everybody around. Or maybe you come in and you're the new owner and you give Eric Bieniemy the job because you think he has all the pedigree and he's got Super Bowls from Kansas City, right? So a lot could happen for him. But even if new management decides we're going to go in a whole different way, we're going to move away from all of these guys. If the Commanders are very good next year offensively, Bieniemy, now that stigma, was it really Andy Reid? How much say did he have? Now they'll know for sure. And if he does very well, he'll get a head coaching job. If the Redskins, Commanders, if they do what they normally do, and it doesn't work out that way, they have to play 27 quarterbacks at the quarterback position in the course of a year. When your best quarterback is a guy named Heineken, then, and he's the third string quarterback anywhere else in the NFL, just the players in the town love him for whatever reason, then they'll just stink up the place, and Eric Bieniemy he might not even get an offensive coordinator's job. He might be a quarterback's coach or handle the wide receivers or something.
Yeah.
So he's got a shot. We'll find out.
Yeah, there you go. So hopefully that's the
So
case.
I got a couple of other things here, bro, that
Yeah,
I
well.
wanted to bring up. That other stuff, I call it. Did you know that Jalen Hurts joined Colin Kaepernick, Steve McNair to be the only two quarterbacks to lead their team in rushing in a Super Bowl, and they all have one thing in common. They all lost the game. So your quarterback leading your team in rushing apparently is not a really good idea. We already talked about the NFL and how they screwed it up with the turf. Oh, your concerns about the referees and Kelsey turned out to be nothing at all. Nothing. And happily so, right? You don't want that going on.
I expected there to be a defensive pass interference call on the Chiefs late in the game that was going to piss me off, and it was just the opposite.
Right. The opposite happened, right? So now the Eagles fans hate him more than you do. So, and then of course, the thing that no one has talked about and is extraordinarily important for everybody to understand, Joe Buck and Troy Aikman were not anywhere near that game, and nothing better could have happened to all NFL fans everywhere. Because that is the worst team out of all the teams that are out there. I thought that Olsen and this other guy, I can't remember his name offhand, they did a great job. They didn't get in the way of the game, and it wasn't about themselves. I was so glad that they didn't give that game to Buck and Aikman. Just so happy that we didn't have to suffer through that again. Every time Fox has had a Super Bowl over the last 15 years, it's been those two jackasses. And if I never hear them call another game, it'll still be a day too soon. I think I'll go pound sand.
I can't argue with you at all on that. Definitely better without those two schmucks.
Oh, yeah.
Especially Joe Buck, man.
Oh.
And I understand why you hate Aikman. You know, that would be like having John Elway doing it for me. You know what I mean?
Hey, John Elway could probably do the job if he could put two sentences together. But
man, I don't want to look at that horse face. He can get out of here.
Look, I got no issues with Tony Romo. I think he does a fine job. True.
Strong point. I didn't put that together. So,
I think Aikman is extraordinarily knowledgeable, and it's just the arrogance about it. And of course, during the regular season, especially during the COVID thing, where they were making offhanded remarks, getting caught on camera, and the progressive liberal do-goodiness, it was just bizarre for guys calling a football game to be going there. And it just they just kept going on the down escalator there for a couple of years, to the point where they became insufferable and you couldn't even listen to them anymore. Because when I'm listening to a professional football game, sports, period, combat sports, baseball, basketball, football, women's swimming, where women are actually swimming, I don't want to hear the politics of the person calling the game. That is the last thing in the world I care about when I'm watching a sporting event, is what the hell Joe Buck and Troy Aikman think about Donald Trump or anybody else for that matter. Just keep it to yourself, or go join one of the alphabet soups of media outlets that's what they do for a living, and just leave the sports alone. It's hard enough to suffer through ESPN and their nonsense. I don't need it when I'm watching Super Bowls and playoffs and those sorts of things. So keep the politics out of it. There's a time for that. And when I'm watching a professional football game, is not the time for it.
And we'd like to take a moment to identify our sponsors: Pfizer, Moderna, and BioNTech.
And don't forget Southern Norfolk. We're big fans. We've done a great job there in the Ohio-Pennsylvania border. Jesus, we'll save that for another day. We've already been doing this for 47 minutes. But that stuff is coming for everybody, because football season is now over. You can count on us to entertain you in other ways. Politics will certainly be one of them, but not just politics. Woke culture, how things work generally, stuff that's just fun for us to talk about, that'll probably infuriate women everywhere. But here's the thing about it. We don't care. That's the whole point, is I am unabashedly a man, unashamed to be one. And if that offends anybody, great. And if it really offends you, even better.
Most of the good keeper ladies don't mind a fairly masculine man. You know what I mean? Like,
well, agreed.
They're kind of looking for a guy who's got a manliness to him. They don't want a little shrimp. You know what I mean?
Well, that's been that's always the way it's been. You know, you look at the old jokes about Cosmopolitan magazine, and sense of humor is number one. Yeah, because the guy that they end up with generally doesn't have a sense of humor and isn't particularly a nice guy, right? It's easy to say the things that you think you're supposed to say, but it's how you act that actually makes the difference. So I'm not buying that men like the way, particularly under a certain age, these young guys today, and I don't even blame them necessarily. They're so horrified to even use their testosterone in any constructive way, because they know that they're just going to get bashed for it relentlessly for just simply being who they were born to be. And that's unfortunate. So fans, that will be other things that we'll be talking about, particularly the state of the human in our world today. Politics be damned. We have a lot to say, and we'll be saying it. That's for sure.
Yeah, a little less football in the off season, so we'll be discussing some other things going on in the world, ongoing topics as they arise. I was so tempted to go off on a tangent about Chinese weather balloons, but for the sake of time, I might not wind that clock.
Well, I got to tell you, nothing says that they are using the height of technology to spy on us than using a very slow-moving giant balloon, as opposed to, say, any one of their 300 satellites that are currently circumnavigating the globe. So, yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot to unlock here, and we're gonna have a lot of fun doing it. But
100%.
I just want to say, as we bring this to a close, the Super Bowl is over. And literally almost everything we said was correct because, as you will learn moving forward, we're rarely ever wrong. And when we are, it's probably your fault.
So, Ed and Chad, 1. Everybody else, 0.
All right. Well, it was great talking to everybody today, and we shall see you soon.
Later.